Heather Cameron to welcome the participants. Dr. Heather, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à notre session d'information sur l'éducation et FinTech. La présentation sera faite en anglais, mais n'hésitez pas de nous communiquer dans les deux langues officielles. Et nous avons non seulement notre équipe commerciale, mais aussi le bureau de Québec ici à Sao Paulo qui peut vous appuyer. It is a real pleasure to open the session today and to provide you with some additional insights and opportunities about the EdTech market here in Brazil. Let me start by thanking Dr. Betina Von Staa for sharing her experience with us in both EdTech and distance learning. And in Brazil, like in Canada, during these pandemic times, the transition towards digital and the expansion of access to these tools has been very much sought after. Lots of learning, but also lots of opportunities for solutions and new technologies. As Claudia said, Brazil is one of the largest economies in the world and is the major education market in Latin America. Canada is very well positioned in Brazil. Not only do we have a trade relationship going back over 150 years, but for more than a decade now, Canada has been the preferred destination for Brazilian students looking to study abroad, whether it's to learn English, to learn French, to pursue high school, graduate, undergraduate studies. The demand for Canadian education is extremely high. And there literally have been tens of thousands of students from Brazil that have come to Canada. It is one of our largest global education markets and a priority education market for the Trade Commissioner Service. We have many Canadian companies in the EdTech field that are already working here in Brazil and have had some success. And of course, we hope today is the first opportunity for yourselves to take a look at this market and to become part of Canada's trade success here. As Consul General in Sao Paulo, our consulate is the hub for our trade promotion services in Brazil, but we have 5 other offices located right across the country and a very large team dedicated to education, a team working on scientific innovation and information communication technologies. Many Canadian education institutes have important research partnerships here, amongst other elements of Canada's presence. And our trade with Brazil is quite significant, particularly in the services sector. So I hope today that this is a great opportunity for you to learn more, to ask for some of your questions, and the trade commissioners in Brazil would be pleased to help support your efforts going forward. As a reminder, there's a number of regional offices across Canada as well for the Trade Commissioner Service that can also link you to trade commissioners around the world. Thank you very much, and best wishes for your work. Thank you. Claudia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heather. Now I'm going to call our presenter, Dr. Betina Von Staa. Dr. Betina is a consultant for the development and promotion of innovation in education. She was responsible for the establishment of G2L in Brazil from 2011 to 2015. She coordinates the National Census of Distance Learning from APERÇU, the Brazilian Association of Distance Learning. And she has a PhD in applied linguistics and has coordinated the development of the 90-volume digital literacy and coding program Tecnologicamente by Pearson and Digital Mindsets by Pearson and Wizard. She has created the creativity and innovation program Transform Me by Macmillan and has co-authored the series English and More by Richmond, and that has been approved to be purchased by the Brazilian government in public schools. She has also produced the teacher's guides for Moderna, Santillana, and FTD. She has helped on the development of next learning methods for higher education distance learning for UOL EdTech. Currently, Dr. Betina is working as a business development for RoboGarden, a Calgary-based company for Brazil, Latin America, and Middle East markets. Without further ado, Dr. Betina, please, over to you.
Okay. No, that's okay. Thank you very much, Claudia. It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be here, to have been able to do this report. It's an area I've been working on for more than a decade now, bringing Canadian technology to Brazil. And we really would like to use this opportunity to show to Canadian companies what the Brazilian market looks like. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I think these four aspects of the Brazilian education market have to be regarded with lots of care. They are very important and very meaningful if you want to enter with a product or a service into this market. First of all, the market is vast. It's humongous. If we think, we are the ninth economy in the world, we are the biggest in Latin America, but we are 220 million Brazilians, and every person studies for a period in their lifetime. So it's a lot of people, okay? But it's not as simple as that. It's not because there's a lot of people that any product is going to reach out to 220 million people, no matter how good and how necessary this product is. Because of the second point, our market is very, very, very regulated. Okay, so we do have regulation by the federal government, by state governments, municipalities have their say. If you're talking about public education, we have laws that have been there for a long while and that have been changed in 2017. We have new laws for education. The higher ed market is regulated by the government, the openings and closings of schools, what is supposed to be taught, and all that is very, very, very regulated. So you will never enter the market if you are not aligned with these regulations. Apart from that, and this comes together, our language, the language we speak here is Portuguese, okay? So it's not Spanish. It's not similar to Spanish. It's not even Portuguese from Portugal. So whenever you have a product that has been translated into Portuguese, you may need to translate it into Brazilian Portuguese too. And this gives us a market protection in the area of education that is indescribable. So you have this big regulated market that speaks a language that few other countries in the world speak. We are no good at foreign languages, so it is Portuguese. And this means we have very strong local players who know how the market works, who know how to tend to this market, and who have plenty of solutions running in Portuguese. So you will always have to compete against a strong local player if you want to enter this vast regulated market. But let's see some figures now. Claudia, let's go to the next slide. So let's see a bit of the size of the market. When we say it's big, it's big. Let's go. So here the numbers are a bit small, but it's an overall estimate. So this is the private K-12 market. So here you will see these numbers in the report too, if you want to see them closer. But here are school system is divided into private and public system. So the public system is enormous, but you will always have to bid to enter the market, and there is lots of regulation of what the governments are allowed to buy. If you want to get quicker into the market, you will need to go into private education. And this is 20% of the K-12 market and 80% of the higher ed market. And we are talking about 1 million preschoolers, 1 million plus a million 0-3-year-olds, then 1 million 4 to 5-year-olds, then almost 3 million students in the first years of elementary school. Then we have 2 more millions in the second phase from 6th to 9th grade, 1 million high schoolers. Okay, so it's a lot of people, and this is 20% of the market. And this market is also organized. It's not that you have lots of individual schools, but these schools are organized in chains. Maybe religious chains or chains that use a specific course material. So all the big publishers have collections of school materials that they sell to the private schools, sometimes also to the public schools. And the schools that use these materials are part of a bigger chain, or you will have all sorts of religious chains and many other chains, and now we have the bilingual chains. So it's we do have the individual schools in a neighborhood, but very often, more often than not, they will be linked to a bigger chain of schools. Let's go to the next one. Okay, in the public school, as we said, it's 80% of the students, and it's not that it's not funded, it's not that it's a big mess. Actually, education in Brazil has been more and more regulated and more protected by constitutional laws. And this year, during the pandemic, we managed to include in the Constitution that funding education is a national priority. The federal government has to support the municipalities that don't have money. And our aim is to spend $1,000 per K-12 student by 2026. So we are talking about 40 million students here. Okay, 43 million students. And it looks like a lot of money, but it's not so easy, because this money has to be used to pay for teachers and for school buildings. And only if there's something left, you will be able to buy technology. And if you want to buy some software, you have to make sure that the school has hardware and connection before you arrive. So there are schools who have it. It's not that it's inexistent, but you will be fighting hard for these possible $1,000 per kid, okay? And this amount of money doesn't include the textbooks. Textbooks are paid by the government. It has been organized in 1994. Every year, the school books get to the schools. The teachers are allowed to choose from a list that's approved by the government. The money is there and it works, and it's apart from the education constitutional budget, okay? Just for you to know that it's regulated, it looks disorganized, but it's not as disorganized as you would think looking for far away. Let's go to the next slide. And so higher ed, it's the opposite. So we have a paradox in Brazil. So 20% of the students in K-12 go to private schools, and then when they want to go to higher ed only absorbs 20% of the students in public higher ed. So most of the students are here in the last bar. That's the private education, okay? So you will have students in 20% of students in public higher education, and we don't know the budget because the budget mixes research and teaching. And in private education, you will have a humongous budget of $12.5 billion to service about 6.5 million students in the private sector that is not so keen on research, but on teaching higher ed level skills. Okay, so this is the paradox. The students who start off in public schools end up paying for private schools. We are changing this a bit with quotas, but it's still harder for the students who go to public schools to enter the public universities. And public universities in Brazil are free, okay? Nobody pays to go there. Let's go to the next one, Claudia. Okay, and then we have distance learning. In Brazil, distance since 2019, which was before the pandemic, we reached 50% of entrants in higher education decided to go into distance learning. So we have a strong tradition of distance learning, and it used to be a choice for those people who didn't have a university close by or who had lost the timing to go to university together with their peers. But now we are seeing young people entering distance learning at their own accord because they believe it's more flexible, more practical, and because Brazil has developed strong distance learning strategies and methodologies and ways to tend the students that are very that are considered very adequate for students' needs. And distance learning is also cheaper than face-to-face learning. So, so now we are talking about 8 million. It's 8 million students that we have in high school, and we also have in higher education, and we also have 8 million students in high school who since last year are allowed to have up to 40% of their course hours at a distance. So this is something new. With the pandemic, the market hasn't even been able to absorb it. Everything was put online. But now the big question is how high school is going to come back if we are also allowed to offer 40% of the time online. So I'll speak a bit more about high school later on, because high school has had a very, very big regulation shift, which will open lots of opportunities in the country. So all of these slides were more or less to tell you, yes, the opportunities are big. Yes, you have to understand what the public and the private sector is like. You have to understand that the public university system is composed of our research university. We have some of them among the best in the world. So they are strong and they feel very empowered. So they feel they can do things on their own and they don't need much help from abroad. The private schools will have more possibilities to absorb innovation, but then they also work with a much tighter budget per student. So these are the paradoxes we have to deal with every day if we just want to see the size of the market. Let's go to the next one. Okay, now about regulation. So in 2017, we finally published our curricular base, our learning standards. It's called BNCC. And it was regulated by the federal government after 30 years of studies by academics of each and every state. And then each state had to agree on this curriculum. That is a law now. It's called the learning rights of every Brazilian citizen. So it's a right now. It's not an obligation to teach, but it's a right to learn. And the states had to opt in to this curriculum, and each and every state in Brazil opted in. So it's valid for all schools, even private schools, even bilingual schools, foreign schools, whatever. Everybody has to be aligned with this curricular based. And it has a very interesting component that it's focused in the development of skills and competencies. This may look like something very natural, but it's a humongous shift in tradition in Brazilian education. So we have a tradition of very much content-based education, and now suddenly there's a law to which everybody adhered, and everybody is supposed to work developing skills and competencies. So new textbooks were produced, new teacher training was produced, and everybody is learning how to work in this new model. And it's very new. It's new for parents, it's new for students, it's new for teachers, it's new for schools. So sometimes you even have this tendency of falling back into what you were used to. You don't change a national system just by changing the law. But there is a wish. So since all states adhered and the course materials are aligned with it, and the teacher training now has to be aligned with it, there are high chances that it will prevail. Okay, so in the long run, everybody will learn to work focused on skills and competencies. Okay, next, go to the next one. So, and here's high school, the new high school law, which is also a complete revolution. So that's, if you are here paying attention, we are facing a revolution in high school in Brazil. So it's a revolution, not even Brazilians know where it's going to lead us. Okay, so think of a learning system that's 500 years old, that high school students never were able to choose electives. They might have been able to choose some extracurricular courses in a very heavy loaded course, so no option. And now you have an increase in hours to obtain the diploma. So it used to be 1,800 and now it's 3,000. But out of these 3,000 hours, 1,200 are composed of electives. So students will be given a choice. They've never been given a choice before. They always had to study the 13 mandatory subjects to be able to take the very difficult entrance exams, especially to the public universities. So this means that the mandatory curriculum has shrunk, okay, and these electives should follow 5 tracks, which would be language, math, social science, natural science, and professional education, okay. So this has been signed 2020 during the pandemic, and some states have accelerated these possibilities. We already see some electives popping up. We see some materials to support electives being created. We see some schools using better their time to give students more choice. And we also see some schools wishing for the past to come back and leave it all as it were with the 13 mandatory subjects. So it's new for everybody, but again, all states have adhered. We have 2 years to make it happen. School materials are being created with this new curriculum. So in a while, we will see what's going on in our system. Let's go on because I'm talking a lot about. So higher ed. Higher ed, we also have strong control about the time that can be developed in distance education and face-to-face hour. The minimum curriculum in higher ed is regulated by the government. Courses and institutions need permission to operate. Every year, 1/3 of the graduates take official exams to keep track of the quality of their student, their lessons. And it's a segment that is still very, very, very traditional, focused on the teacher, on lecturing. But again, in 3 years, when the new high school students enter university, they may start wishing for something different, as they are already starting to think with the pandemic and thinking, lessons can be different than I thought. So we are in a moment of a creative explosion where students wish for something different, and institutions are having to adapt if they want to keep their students. Especially in the private education system, you have strong competition, so you'd better offer what your students want, otherwise they will visit your neighbor. So let's go to the next one. As I told you, in this very peculiar market, we have very strong local players. So I'll mention some of them here. This map shows the biggest players in K-12. So you see most of them are Brazilians. So APERÇU is a Brazilian company that originated in the northeast of Brazil, in the state of Ceará. Then we have SEB, also Brazilian, Somos, here from São Paulo, Brazilian, Eleva by João Paulo Leman, Brazilian, FTD, Brazilian, Religious also. And we also have big players like Pearson from Great Britain, and Santillana from Spain, Macmillan from USA, and SM from Spain. But you have to be aware that these foreign companies, they did not impose their content in Brazil. So they saw a big market, they saw great opportunities, and Pearson really bought most of the biggest learning systems in Brazil that were already in place and started commercializing local content, okay? Because if their foreign content is only usable in English as a foreign language. But if you want to enter the market, you need local content. So Santillana has done the same. They bought lots of local content. SM the same. Macmillan is the one that keeps the biggest foot in bilingual and has not bought so much here in Brazil. And now Pearson has sold part of their assets to APERÇU, which is the biggest leader and Brazilian. So you see the Brazilian leaders knowing very well how to deal with the market, and they end up getting it all, okay? So if you see, and this is in the education, school, and publisher area. And here this other image shows the technologies that the schools mentioned they were using. At the moment, pandemic struck and they had to move into remote learning. So if you take a close look, this image is there in the report. If you take a close look, Google is king. And apart from that, we have very few players, most of them linked to these big groups on the left of the slide. So I would say there is lots of room for innovation here and for new technology. We just didn't have the habit to use it up to now before it turned into something very important. So it's a difficult market to enter. But I believe we have opened a crack recently, okay? And you have all the big Brazilian players having a say, except for Google, because Google came with Google Class and Google Meets, and they were the big savers of the emergency movement, okay? And people believe Google is for free. So that's also an issue. Let's go to the next one.
10 minutes, okay?
Okay, thank you. So in higher ed, the big players here, you will recognize no name, okay? It's dominated by local players. So Unopah, Unip, Unaselvi, you never heard this name abroad, okay? And they are happy with the Brazilian market. They have huge number of students each. These 10 players are responsible for more than 70% of the market. So Unopah has 360,000 students, followed by Unip with 215,000. And if you see some of these universities, they are together under the umbrella of a single investor group, which we are going to see in the next slide. So it's very consolidated. The private market is very consolidated and local players rule. Let's go to the next one. So here are the big consolidators and investors that own most of these other universities and the biggest chains of schools in Brazil. So if you want to know the names of the investors, some of them will be listed in New York, so you can. they are open companies. So Cogna is a big name. They own more than half the market, or they want to. The government just doesn't let them. They're there, close, getting to half of the market. Edux, which owns Estácio, Cruzeiro do Sul, Barrema, Edu Invest, Arpun, SEB, Eleva, which we have seen in former slides as biggest school owners in the K-12 sector. Let's go to the next one, please. Now about the language, let's reinforce this. Brazilians speak Portuguese. So it's 5% of our population who can speak English more or less fluently. Let's go to the next one, please. And so this means you will not be able to enter with a product here if it's not translated. So if it's not translated, you may tend to 5% of the population that already speaks English. And we'll have to be aware that Brazilian Portuguese is so different from Portuguese that we don't accept the translation. It's not because we are ill-mannered, but it's too different for a Brazilian to follow. And so you need to, if you have it translated into European Portuguese, you need to retranslate it into Brazilian Portuguese. We do have an opportunity here because since 2020, English turned into a mandatory subject from 6th to 9th grade. So there is opportunity for learning materials, teacher training, and whatever for this segment. But you will never be able to count on a group of teachers that can learn the teacher's guide in English. Even in bilingual schools, you have to offer teachers teacher guides in Portuguese, okay? You will only be able to escape the Portuguese teacher's guide if you're talking about English as a second language for the total elite, where you have the best teachers of all, and then you will be able to do a program that's 100% in English, okay? So we have a history that even private schools used to leave the text of teaching English to these independent elite language schools. So even private schools didn't take upon themselves the responsibility to teach English well to their students. Now this is changing because the good private schools are competing with the bilingual schools. The public schools are offering some English, so the private schools have to offer a little better English. So there's a good market to explore there about learning English with quality. And we know in corporate education that English is in corporate culture and in university acceptance and so on, that English is the most excluded requirement for people to continue education or to get good jobs. So there are social movements now requesting that companies and universities do not require English as mandatory for people to get a job. And many companies are adhering to it to be able to give more equitable opportunities to the local population. So if people want to learn, they will learn it in service, they will learn it as corporate education. So you will have all of these possibilities to teach English, but it shouldn't be a barrier for people to develop their profession. Okay, so this is an important discourse in Brazil. Let's go to the next one. And now the nice slide. Where are the opportunities in Brazil? So we do have established players in elite English, but now we have this open market for English for all. And we do have established players in corporate education for soft skills. So EdTech and many other providers, APERÇU and so on. But we have few players in the market dealing with innovation, 21st century skills, technology, and assessment tools, which will be more and more necessary after the pandemic. Okay, and we do have, after the pandemic, we will also see a big need for remedial education, acceleration of learning, and personalized learning, which can be solved with technical tools, but not only. You will also need local content to be able to perform these tasks. But these are the big needs in Brazilian education now. So we have opened up to innovation, to skill development. People understood technology as part of education. So if you avoid the established players and find another crack into the system and think about the need for local content, you will have good opportunities here. And in this consolidation movement, we also see lots of investors buying schools. The other day, a Chilean group came here and bought 10 kindergartens, okay? We have Maple Bear, a bilingual school that's opening schools and buying schools all over the country. It's a Canadian originated group that was now bought by a Brazilian player. So we do have these opportunities, okay? And the next slide is also very important, Claudia. So when we think of Canadian companies coming here, you will have two types of products and services. So you can be either totally disruptive and innovative, and then you will have to invest in communication, evangelizing, and creating partnerships over here, because the market may understand that they need it, but may not be understand it's the right moment for them to invest, or may not even understand the meaning of your innovation. So you will have to come with your product, translate it, have partners, and do lots of communication to enter the market. So that's what we've done with D12. That's what we are doing with RoboGarden. So if you are disruptive and innovative, you end up finding your place, because you won't have a big competitor here, and you will find people who are wishing to innovate. But if your product is of the type high quality and high price, you will have lots of difficulties, because you will probably find a very strong competitor with probably with lower quality, that's okay, and lower price. But if you are just offering higher quality, it will be very difficult to make a Brazilian pay more for higher quality, okay? We've seen this in many industries. In the computer industry, where Positivo turned into king, they had a good enough computer for the right price, and they sold more than all the foreigners combined, okay? So Brazilians are not very keen on paying more for high quality, but they do pay for disruption and innovation and for things that they don't see an equivalent. But then you won't see the 220 million people buying it. You will have to find your niches. And that's why we say, let's go to the next one, Claudia. And that's why we say you will need partners to be successful, okay? You will need people in the country to translate all of these subtleties to you, and to understand your market fit. So your product will never address the whole market, but it may fit elite schools, it may fit low-cost schools, it may be a fit to public education, okay? But you will need a local partner to translate it to you. It's very difficult to understand it from a distance. And so that's what we say. You have to understand the market, find an advisor, do translate, don't delay translating, okay? So translating into Portuguese is key, because if you don't do it, the local players have done it already. They have their products in Portuguese, and you will never overcome this barrier, okay? You will have to find the right price. So the amount of money that is there to be invested in novelties is not as much as we would think. So you have to find the right price, thinking that you can get a big market in the end. And you also, I haven't mentioned currency, but we do have our Brazilian reais, which is the only Brazilian currency accepted by law. So you should charge in Brazilian reais. You might need contracts in Portuguese, okay? And after all this investment, you also have to be patient, because very probably you will be in the area of innovation and disruption. And this means you will have to communicate with the country for some years before you start doing your big sales, okay? So I've seen this before. And being patient is brings rewards, okay? But I wouldn't put it into a target like, let's invest in Brazil and get money out of the country very quickly. So I would make sure your company is safe and sound with all the financial issues, and then you come to the Brazilian market to expand, invest a bit, and wait a while to reap the results, okay? Next one. That's it. Okay. So thank you very much. And here's my contact if you wish to.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. You have it there in the last slide.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. This was very comprehensive and detailed. I hope everybody could extract these valuable lessons from your experience working with some of the Canadian companies here in Brazil as well. Now let's move to this doing business presentation. So nothing that I'm going to talk here, it's new. I'm sure you have heard about that before, the same advices in different markets. And Dr. Betina also mentioned a few tips about doing business here, but I may reinforce some of them as well. The truth is the key to make it to be successful when in developing a new market is focus. If you really want to target a market like Brazil, you need to do your homework. You need to dedicate some efforts to the region. This market is not for beginners and will not provide short-term returns. You need to have a minimum knowledge about the country and a specific segment you're targeting. And we are here to help you. So let's start by talking about our trade platform. So the structure that we have here. Besides the embassy in Brasilia, we have 2 consulate general in São Paulo and Brazil, and we have 3 trade offices located in strategic regions throughout the different regions. As Dr. Heather mentioned, the trade commissioner services are spread throughout these offices, working in different industry sectors. My role here is work with the ICT companies in general, including EdTechs, providing support for the business development in Brazil and the whole country. The education team in Brazil that we have here works to promote Canadian education and research capabilities fostering academic partnerships, selling education services such as Canadian curriculum, capacity building, training programs, and support Canadian education institutions on their recruitment efforts in the market. Usually, they work with Canadian education institutions, consortiums, school boards, and their local network includes Brazilian education institutions, education agents, and government representatives, such as funding agencies, ministries, and ministry and the secretaries of education. And of course, we work all in collaboration, and whenever our clients need services that fall within ICT and the education market. Brazil is facing the same challenges regarding COVID-19 outbreak. Currently, COVID took the lives of 408,000 people in Brazil as of today, and we are just trying to leave the second wave behind. So we have around 24% of the population with at least the first dose of the vaccine. Last year, during the first months of the pandemic, we felt like Brazilians in general were more accessible, more available, and open for online meetings. As months pass by, business space is back to normal, and we see people feeling the effects of online fatigue with all the overloaded agendas. But in general, we are still receiving good responses and positive access to local contacts whenever we need to reach out to them. Flights are operating normally, and Brazil does not have restrictions for the entrance of Canadian citizens here, but we do recommend to avoid non-essential travel to the country. In case you need to come down, it's required to present to the airline company a COVID test made in the last 72 hours before flight departure. Also, health insurance is mandatory for the duration of your visit. Visa is not required for business visitors of up to 90 days. Only visitors from UK, South Africa, and India are required to make a 14 days quarantine in Brazil. This information may change anytime, so please check with the Brazilian foreign diplomatic offices before you plan for a travel to the country. Brazilians do business with people and not companies or organizations. Therefore, it's vital to make strong connections. And you already heard from Dr. Betina and probably heard the same in different countries, especially in Latin America region. Relationships are very important. Negotiations can take much longer than expected because decision-making process can be slow. Sometimes to close a deal, several demos and pilots are required, and Brazilian companies will expect to have that at no cost. Major trade shows were canceled last year and this year, and it's too soon to know when they will be reestablished in physical format. Some organizers are planning to do so in the next months, but of course, this decision will depend on the pandemic evolution in the country. Currently, large events are still not allowed. We at the Trade Commissioner Services are planning most of our events in virtual format, at least until the end of this year. In Brazil, we have a predominantly young and very well-connected population. Therefore, digital marketing and social media are very effective ways to promote your company in the country. WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and LinkedIn are heavily used for business and entertainment. Media campaigns can be done via Google Ads, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, email, and LinkedIn ads. A good local partner, distributor, can use their social media pages to showcase your solution to the market together with a good marketing agency. Also reminding you that CanExport funding can be used to cover digital marketing expenses. So let me talk a little bit about Custo Brasil. Custo Brasil is a common expression used to define all the extra costs of doing business in Brazil, especially because of the bureaucracy complicated taxation system, regulation, compliance, inflation, exchange rates, all sorts of unexpected expenses and the risks that it can impact your business. Therefore, it's important to work with the local experts to plan accordingly to all of this. Hiring local employees can be challenging due to payroll costs and protective labor laws for workers that include mandatory benefits not usually common in Canada. Some of these benefits include like a 33% vacation bonus, a 13th month salary, transportation, meals, vouchers, just to name a few examples. The good side for Canadian companies contracting local resources now is the favorable exchange rate. Since December 2019, Brazilian reais were devaluated at more than 30%. So let me talk about LGPD. It's the Brazilian General Data Protection Law. It's known as LGPD. Last year, on August 2020, Brazil's General Data Protection Law entered into force. Inspired on the European GDPR, it's important to know that the LGPD's territorial scope extends beyond Brazil. This means that Canadian companies that process the personal data of people located in Brazil, offering SaaS services, for example, must comply with the new LGPD, even if the company does not have a physical presence in Brazil. Anonymized data is not considered personal data. Software taxation and double tax treat. The tax regime for software operations in Brazil is quite complex and challenging to understand, with several taxes, contributions, and tariffs in different levels of government, federal, state, and municipal, and also subject to frequent changes and different interpretations. Therefore, it's very important to be at least familiar with that before you come to a proposal discussion with your prospects here. We always advise companies to consult with a local expert or law firm. Brazil and Canada have a treaty, tax treaty to avoid double taxation since 1986. It should be noted that tax treaties are generally applicable to federal taxes on income. From a Brazilian tax perspective and in the context of international transactions between Brazil and Canada, the provisions of the treaty will apply to reduce or limit the applicable withholding taxes on payments of dividends, interest, royalty, capital gains, etc. It should be noted that the tax treaty provides that a Canadian entity receiving dividends, interest, or royalties from Brazil is entitled to claim foreign tax credit higher than was effectively paid in Brazil. In the case of royalties, the Canadian company might be allowed to claim in Canada a foreign tax credit of 20%, even though it's subject to a 15% withholding tax in Brazil. This should be further discussed and analyzed together with a competent Canadian tax advisor. As such, the treaty does not have the effect to reduce the applicable taxation on import of goods or nor the collection of taxes on payments for services and softwares other than the withholding tax. So what are our advices? If you want to target this market and don't know how to start by attending events once they are resumed, of course, or participating on our virtual trade missions, for example. It can be helpful to acquire local knowledge and start to build your local network. We do recommend that you have a Portuguese-speaking person in your team, if you can, to help navigate not only with the language that can be a barrier, but also with the local culture. Establish a presence in the country, not necessarily with an office, but by using a rep or a local distributor, an individual or a company that with good connections and active in the market of interest. Some companies are also using Miami in the US as a gateway for Latin America, especially if you have interest in other countries down here. It's not like being here, but it's better to facilitate travels to the region once they are allowed. The education sector is highly competitive, and the local EdTech community has been growing in the past years. And therefore, it's important to rely on good partners and have good professional advisors to compete in this local market. And take advantage of the government programs such Can Export. There are funds available to support your international expansion plans. So let us know if you are not familiar with the program. We can help you with the application process. Can Export will be closing in the next days for new applications due to the high volume of requests, but will be opening again in the fall. So stay tuned about that. And finally, I did not want to scare you with all these challenges, but we are here to help you. Please feel free to connect with us whenever you need local support. So let's move to the questions and answer. Let me see here. Let me go back to the screen here. Do we have any question there on the chat? Okay. I think we don't have questions, Betina. The presentation was great. So maybe we still have a few minutes, I guess. Oh, we are almost on time, actually. So maybe I have a question here. So from your personal perspective and having worked with some Canadian companies, what's the best advice that you can give to the companies that will start on this journey here into the exploration of the local market?
Yeah, unfortunately, the best advice I can give is to be patient. So the market is promising. We've had great success with both companies that I accompanied. I know of other companies who have been successful here, but it takes time. It takes time for you to be known. It takes time for you to overcome all the local barriers and all the local players. You may need to partner with the local players. So to have an advisor to help you navigate is always very good, because they will show you where the best opportunities lie. And probably, very probably, you will end up partnering with one of these big local players.
Okay. Thank you. And also, I think it's also, we can say we are living a good moment, right? The education market in general was not prepared, or was prepared for the pandemic, but especially the education sector was not prepared for that. And they are trying to adapt. But I think for the next months and the next years, we will see they taking more seriously the use of technology, the incorporation of this all these tools that they got to experience for the first time. Is that correct, Justin?
Certainly.
Okay.
I was looking here at some other questions.
Yeah, actually, we got some questions here.
There are some for you and some for me.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about Can Export program. I can send some more information about that. There's a web page about explaining the requirements to apply for the program, but it's a great funding opportunity that our Canadian companies can use. Another one here, as a smaller business, should we look to sell our product to a larger reseller as a first entry into the market?
So that's a very good question. This would be a good idea. Of course, this is what you want to do, but you will not be able to start off selling your product to a larger reseller. Even the resellers will have to know you and trust you and see if the product is ready for the market. So you will have to test the grounds. You will have to look into different partners. And yes, ideally, a good, a happy end would be for you to sell the product to a larger reseller or to a big player who will really incorporate it into their portfolio. But these companies are so big and so self-sufficient that you really have to come up with something new that they can do on their own, that will add value to their portfolio for them to even consider the product, okay? But it's no problem being small. This is no problem.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, David, we are going to send the link for the recorded version. We are recording this webinar. We will be sending together with the market report to all the participants. Okay, there's one specific for the mining. In terms of the mining sector and technical trades training, like for heavy equipment, most equipment manufacturers only supply manuals in English. How do companies like Kinross deal with this? Great question. I actually, I can connect you to my colleague from the mining sector who works directly with companies like Kinross, for example. I would say in general, to read English is not a problem. But of course, depending on the level of the workers that you are dealing with, for example, in the civil construction, for example, building, at this level, you won't find people even able to understand basic English. So it depends. I wouldn't know how this works for the mining sector specifically, but we can maybe discuss more with my colleague from the mining that covers the industry.
What I know in different sectors is that you end up finding a local partner who will do the translation, who will do the local training. So there are lots of companies that don't invest by themselves in translation, but they have a partner who will earn money with the training or something like this, and then they would invest in the translation, because really there's a level of worker that you simply will not achieve with manuals in English. That's the truth, okay? You might reach their boss, but not the whole team. So it depends on who needs to read your materials. But there are lots of local training companies, corporate training companies that end up absorbing this task.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think we had all of this as for questions, and we actually passed a little bit from the time that was scheduled. So this is just to show our team here in Brazil and our contacts information. So both for the ICT and education, and so please feel free to reach out to us to start to explore this Brazilian market. And this brings us to the end of the webinar. I really appreciate your participation and interest in watching the session, and hope that you find the information presented useful, and that despite all the challenges and complexity, you are encouraged to invest some time to explore the opportunities here in the market. I want to thank Dr. Betina for presenting today and for all the hard work to build the report to us, and I'm sure that will help our Canadian clients. As a reminder, we are available to have a more in-depth conversation, so please connect with us. And thank you very much for attending this session. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.